The one thing no one ever trains you for in radio is how to deal with tragedy on the air. Police killings, school shootings, pandemics. We have no idea what we're supposed to do, but Miguel and Holly from the Miguel and Holly show at Tampa Bay at Hot 101.5 have always stood out to me as the guys that handle it extremely well. So I reached out to Miguel to see if he could give us some tips or just kind of walk us through his process of how he deals with tragedy the next day, because he's had to deal with the Pulse shooting. Obviously, George Floyd has been happening lately in the pandemic. So what do you do the next day when you wake up? Miguel has some amazing insight, and if you want to know more about Miguel, you can check out this video here. I talked to him about his whole radio journey, how he used to ride the bus 3 hours to school, and how he ended up hosting his own morning show with a co-host he only knew for a day and ended up living with her. It's a super interesting story, so if you want to see that, again, check it out up there. But for this, we're going to talk about how you deal with tragedy on the air the next day. It's unfortunate that we have to think that, the next tragedy is coming, because, it is, and we have to be prepared for it. So how do you deal with that morning? You wake up and you're like, holy crap, what happened last night? What is your first thing that you do?
I think first off is you as a human being, as a communicator, have to just stop for a second, because I know that morning, and it still happens to me every time, the morning after, and you're like, okay, how am I going to talk about this? What am I going to do? What I've learned is that you got to stop for a second and do sort of a gut check, because that old phrase is you can't give from an empty cup. And when your listeners are tuning in to hear information and comfort from you, you've got to be right within yourself for that moment. So I would sort of just do a gut check. Are you okay? How do you feel? Are you sad? Are you mad? What emotion are you registering right now? So I sort of know how I want to deal with how we're going to talk about it. So then from there, depending upon what the situation is, we decide on, do we need to get an expert on to talk about what happened? Is there an eyewitness, if it's something that's close by that we can get on? Or do we just want to give the facts of what's happening and then transition into, this is really bad, these are the facts, but let's hear some good news today, and we're just going to do a show of good news? Or do we just want to open up the phone lines and let you vent and just talk from your heart? And so you sort of got to do a gut check with yourself to see what sort of show is it going to be that day. And that's sort of what we do before there's a tragedy, or after there's a tragedy and we have to go on the air.
Yeah, so as a top 40 show, you can't not talk about something that's popular, that's happening in pop culture, but there are things that are really hard to address. So let's specifically talk about the Pulse shooting that was in Orlando. How far is Orlando from you?
It's about 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
So, it's right down. We're all right here in Central Florida.
Okay, and as a gay man, this was a big thing in the gay community, obviously, because it was a terrible tragedy. Did you have to approach it in a different way because you related so much to it?
For me, I just feel like with our show, and I don't know if this is great broadcasting, but it's led me through my career, is I'm an open book. And I can't compartmentalize. So I'm going to be me. What you see is what you get. So that Sunday morning when I woke up, I remember I had some texts from family members in Atlanta. My mom was like, are you okay? Were you in Orlando? Because I would go to Orlando every now and then. And I was like, wait, what's going on? And I remember walking into the living room and turning on the news and CNN and just seeing the repeated frames of them pulling people out and carrying people in the flashing lights in the club. And it was just oh my gosh. And so immediately I was like, wait a minute, we need to talk about this. What we need to go in. And so then we talked with our PD, we talked with everybody that was on the air. And so we decided on that Sunday, we need to go in and we need to talk about this, because our community is hurting. Because as soon as I got on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, I saw that my gay friends were talking about it, listeners, straight people were talking about it. It was just a really tragic situation that everyone was talking about. And so then we have to go into the voice of your city. You have to help them start that process of grieving and giving out information. And so that's what we did that Sunday.
How do you deal with the emotion of the event? So do you let it hit you right away, or do you feel that you have to be the news, like the reporter, the person that tells everything out? Are you allowed to feel anything?
To me, there's a difference between a journalist and what we do. I'm not a journalist. I have an associate's degree in it, but I'm not a journalist. No one's sending me to any, war-torn cities to report live from anywhere. I'm not that person. So Holly is the person on our show that will gather the facts, and she will say, here's what's happening right now. So there's that one part. And then from there, we just talk about it. And we're very honest with our audience. And we're like, listen, if you want the straight facts, turn on the news, go to our Tampa Bay Times, our big newspaper here. But we're here to communicate and to share our feelings about it. And so to me, I feel like as a talent, as a radio person, your listeners want to know how you feel. They're checking in to say, am I being hysterical? Is it right that I feel sad? Is it right that I feel mad? So you have to be honest about it. And there are times when we've had like a school shooting where my tone is not, oh my gosh. I'm like, I'm mad. Like, we have to come in here and rip up our show and talk about this. When does this stop? And so when you are just talking from your heart, from your gut, and you are just being authentic with your feelings, your listeners feel you, no matter what that emotion is, and they feel like they're in on the big conversation with the people that they tune into every morning. So absolutely, we give our emotions.
Has that ever backfired on you?
No, it hasn't, because I feel like we're honest.
Yeah.
And I always tell our listeners that, listen, I'm not smart enough to lie, so I can't come in here and try to be someone that I'm not. And so we're gonna say the uncomfortable things. And what we always say is, we hope that we've built up enough of a relationship and trust with you and the Miguel and Holly fam that if we say something that you don't agree with, call us up, call us out on it. That's okay. This is what families do. They disagree. And I think because we are who we are, and that's how I feel, and I tell that to my friends, I tell that to my family, listeners, even if they don't agree with what we have to say, they still respect the fact that we're being real about it.
Now it's something you can't learn, I don't think. Do you think that there's any way that people can become that? Like, obviously, you are that person. You're the person that if you have something to say, you will say it. Not everybody's like that. How do you become that person?
I think you have to realize who you are. And I think because I'm a gay Black man, you learn self very early because you spend a lot of time up here in your head figuring out who you are. And so I've been very blessed in that as a radio talent and being able to know concretely, this is who Miguel Fuller is. So I say that you need to start with, who are you? What do you stand for? What are your intentions? Because that's what we do with every segment that we do, or anytime that we open up the mics. I always, and it's sort of subconscious now, I ask myself, what's the intention of this break? Is it to communicate anger or to communicate a feeling? So if you are a person, and let me say this too, I'm not a radio consultant, I'm not a psychologist. This is sort of just the advice that I've given to people, and I don't know if it's the right answer, but I feel like you have to be honest with your audience. Because I've also gone on the air and said that I see this sad event, I don't feel sad, but I feel like I should be. Am I weird for that? Or am I now desensitized? So even in because that might be an emotion that some people feel, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to seem like an ass, like I don't care about people. But I'm telling you, you're not the only person feeling that feeling. And so your listeners are going to be like, yeah, I kind of feel that too. Like, I'm kind of desensitized. And then that opens up a whole nother discussion to where you are adding to your character and you're not just this voice coming out of the radio. You're now telegraphing, I'm a person who feels, who doesn't feel. Am I a psychopath because I don't feel? There are other people who feel that too. But that just opens up the door to your listeners getting to know you and you deepening that relationship with them even further.
Do you think that there is a way to not handle a tragedy?
Yes. I think if you don't take people's feelings seriously, and okay, so perfect example of the morning show that got let go after George Floyd, when they were talking about the protesters and called them thugs and they were saying the N-word and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know as a talent how you mess up that bad. Like, even if you are on the most conservative, Donald Trump loving radio station, and not even that, like, just it just, to me, that baffles me. I don't understand it because I'm just a very empathetic person, and so I always do like that gut check of like, all right, is this going to be inappropriate? Is this going to be appropriate? Do I need to put out a warning before it? But I think you have to realize that when there's a tragedy, someone's hurting. Someone in your audience is hurting, whether it's a school, whether it's the Las Vegas shooting with the country concert, like those are still human beings. And imagine if you were at a concert, having beer and enjoying it, and all of a sudden that starts to happen. I don't care who you are, you can empathize with that. So I think that if you don't take what's happening seriously, that's how you're totally missing the mark, like that morning show who got let go recently.
And let them never work again.
Bye.
So what do you think about format breaking? Let's say you're on an AC station and you have 60-second breaks and this tragedy happens in your community, like your listening area. How do you feel about breaking format?
I think that, if you are a single person morning show, and you don't do a lot of serious stuff like this, or if you don't really open up a lot and it's just a lot of, like concerts and stuff that's happening in the community, and you've never done that before, tread lightly, because that's where you can sort of like misstep and like say the wrong thing because you feel awkward. But I do think that that's where you can lean on your audience to help you. And simply by breaking format, if you're on an AC station that, you've never talked over 60 seconds and your management says, hey, we want you to open up, and you're like, oh, I've never done that before. Be honest. Hey, this isn't what I normally do, but we know that you're hurting right now. There are some things happening. How do you feel? Call us up. Let us know. Let your audience do the talking for you. And then they will direct you on where they want the show to go and how they want to. If no one calls up, all right, well, we're just going to let you know what happened, and then we're going to play some songs to make you feel good. Or if you want to call up with some positive news in your life or some good stories happening around town, then you can always find a route. But don't feel like that you've got to go out of your comfort zone to where you will make those mishaps and those mistakes to where you'll end up, on TMZ or something.
Is there any advice that you would have that we haven't covered for someone that has a tragedy in their market that is on a global scale? Like, George Floyd, I feel like over the last couple of years, you've had a really rough time. Like, because as a gay black man, like, it's just been like, how you been? How are you, Miguel? How's everything going?
I am tired.
Yeah.
Like I don't hide my feelings well. I'm tired because we have reached an awakening that is amazing, but I'm doing a lot of hand holding with our audience because we are so open, and I welcome that and I applaud that. I'd so much rather our listeners ask us. We had this beautiful phone call from this woman who called in who said, I'm a white woman. I have 2 biracial children. I've always taught them never to see color, but now I'm being told that that's wrong to do. I feel like I'm an awful mother because of it. And she was just in tears. And I said, okay, hold on for 1 second here. You're not an awful mom. You're doing the best you can do. Here are some reasons why people say that's not the right way. here are some things that you can do now that you know better, do better. If you don't, that's you. That's on you now that you have the information. So going through that, being open and honest, and I've come into this point in my career right now with everything that's going on where I've had to make some personal decisions on how I've always been the no matter what your opinion is, it's fine, we'll listen. But I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, there's just some racist stuff that I just can't take and I can't handle. And for my own mental health, I can't go there with you. I can't do it. And so there have been times where on shows, my mom was like, Holly was talking a lot about race issues and you were kind of quiet. And I was like, girl, I'm tired. I can't. I spent 3 hours the day before responding to messages on Instagram and Facebook from listeners about resources that they need and things like that. And so you've got to, as a talent, you got to take care of yourself first. And that's what the balance I'm trying to learn right now when taking care of myself, because I feel like with COVID, with George Floyd, the unrest, it's sort of just been like nonstop. And so I've even had to on social media, and I'm usually not one to ever do this, I've had to unplug for the weekend and say, I'm sorry, I can't respond this weekend. I got to go watch one of my ridiculous shows on Netflix, or I've got to go to a friend's house and hit up their hot tub and just sit there and listen to Lady Gaga. I can't.
Yeah.
So I am getting through it. I think we're in a very magical time. And by magical, I mean there is an awakening that's happening, and I can see it with our listeners. And it gives me goosebumps when I think of the conversations that we've had on the air, in social media, in the DMs. That's really been encouraging to me, that people are listening and they're being empathetic. And they're having these tough conversations, our white listeners, and non-people of color, with their family members. And so it's sort of like a ripple effect of what's happening, at least locally here in Tampa.
Okay, so do you feel like the clouds are forming? Is that what you said?
Yes, the clouds are definitely gathering when it comes to even my co-host Holly and our producer Scott, he's just really dug down into learning about Black culture and watching the documentaries like 13th on Netflix, and Just Mercy with the movie with Michael B. Jordan and Jamie Foxx, and reading Michelle Obama's book and immersing himself in Black culture. And Holly's been reading the 1619 Project from the New York Times about the first slaves that were brought over here, and their eyes. And these are people that love me, that know me. And, I've drug Holly to some Black movies and said, girl, come on, you got to watch this with me. I've made Scott, who lives with me now, watch movies. And it was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But now they're looking at it with different eyes, and it's happening all over. And it's been really interesting to watch. And it'll be more interesting to see where we are in 2 years from now.
Yeah.
It's been really, really, really encouraging to see.
Well, Miguel, I think that you got a lot of good information here, and it seems like it would be, everybody knows this, like, be honest, be yourself, but it's really hard in some formats, and some jocks can't do it. Like, I know that it's really tough for me to do, and I wanted to have this as one of the topics because you guys do it so well. You are so open, and you're so confident, and you're so, like, yourself, that it's hard for all of us to do that. So I thank you for sharing the information. And how can we reach out to you and get in contact and maybe pick your brain on the next unfortunate tragedy?
Absolutely. You can always hit me up on Instagram at Miguel Fuller, on Twitter, Miguel Fuller as well. Or you can always just send me an email, fuller.miguel@gmail.com. And if you ever need any help, please, 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 if it weren't for the people that helped me out coming up, I would be nowhere. So please feel free to reach out.